good critical mass. So good morning, and thank you so much for coming to this session. I'm really excited to get to talk about work that I love passionately and that I feel really honored to get to do. And I'm also excited to hear what your work is and to learn from you. I realize that in this kind of setting, there are many of you who've been doing public-private partnership work and community collaboration way longer than I have been. I've been doing professional development work a long time, but this public-private partnership is relatively new for me the last 4 years or so. And so I'm excited to learn from you about, come on in, please, yeah. About a week ago, I said to one of my colleagues, I said, so here's my new idea for my session at PSPP. I'm going to do about a 20-minute presentation, and then I'm going to have 40 minutes at a think tank with all these smart people in the room. Come on in, folks. There are plenty of chairs over here and a couple up here. And so I could pick people's brains, and I know that's not what I get to do today, but I do hope that over the course of the next day and a half, I have an opportunity to learn from you, and I'd love after you hear what we're doing at the Sophia Center, I'd certainly welcome your input and your insights and your suggestions. I believe in that kind of collaboration. So part of the Sophia Center mission, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, is this connection among participants. So I want to start by doing quick introductions. We will do them quickly, but I think it's important here in this kind of setting for us to, I'd like to know what your work is, where you're working, and for us to know one another. That's why we're here, is for that work. So we'll do this really briefly, and I just invite you to say your name and the school or organization with which you're affiliated, if you are, I'm assuming most of you are, and your role. And that's about it. We'll just keep it that brief. So I'll start. I'm Cheryl Chard. I'm the founder and director of the Sophia Center for Professional Development at Bosque School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'll start here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monique Potts. I'm the director of the Community Engagement Office at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts.
I'm Chris Fishin. During the school year, I teach 4th grade in Chagrin Falls, and in the summer, I've been fortunate to serve as the Dean of Faculty for the Aspire program.
I'm Lisa Vehe, and I run a network for instructional coaches in the Cleveland area from charter, public, and Catholic schools.
My name is Stephanie Dodd, and I'm the elected board member for Ohio State Board of Education.
I'm Sue Gallagher from Hathaway Brown School. I'm the primary science teacher here.
Hi, Bridget Kishubik, and I teach 7th grade history, and I'm the 7th grade dean.
I'm Morgan Losey. I teach 5th and 6th grade math at Hathaway Brown.
In this
In this
fantastic
room.
Patricia Gafford, I teach 1st grade here at Hathaway Brown.
And I teach 5th grade here.
Oh, it's so nice to meet all of you.
Hi, I'm Shelley Aaron, and I teach in upper school visual art at Hathaway Brown.
Great.
I'm Lori Harris, and I'm the 6th grade dean and math teacher here at Hathaway Brown.
I'm Molly Cornwell, and I teach upper and middle school theater at Hathaway Brown.
I love it.
I'm Rick Malmstrom. I'm from the Ellis School in Pittsburgh, not from here. And I teach upper school history and also coordinate service learning.
Oh, great. I know a colleague of yours will.
I am David Vanuoli. I am a 10th grade intervention specialist at the Cleveland High School for Digital Arts.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Allison Dornberg, director of public purpose at Rye Country Day School in Rye, New York.
I'm Megan Ritchie. I teach preschool here at Hathaway Brown.
Oh, great. This is your colleague.
Yes.
Candace Badner. I also teach preschool here at Hathaway Brown.
Carrie Bernowski. I also teach preschool.
And I already heard some great stories of what preschoolers say. So one who came in recently and announced that sometimes her dad doesn't wear underwear. So, this is the information that you don't want to tell your preschoolers when you don't want to go to school. So.
I'm Luke Kaladik. I'm a 4th and 5th grade science and social studies teacher and after school director, I suppose, right? At Wheeling Country Day School.
My name is Julie Cartwright. I am the Wheeling Country Day School. I am director of operations, a school chef, and a member of the faculty.
A lot of our hats to wear.
My name is Tim Howard. I'm also from the Ellis School in Pittsburgh, and I'm the director of technology.
Great. And one more person who just came in, welcome. Hi, just your name and where you work and what you do.
I'm Tori McMillan. I work here at Hathaway Brown. I direct our Center for Sustainability.
Great. So it's so nice to have all of you here. Thank you for coming to this session. And as I said, I'm really excited to share with you the work that we're doing, and I look forward to learning with you and from you over the course of the next day and a half. So I want to start with just set the stage a little bit and let you know the context of the work, and then as the workshop description described, I'll talk mostly about the Reflect, Innovate, Act series and how that's come about and what's working really well and what our challenges are, and hopefully we'll have time for some conversation around that as well. So we'll start with, I live in the land of enchantment. That is the New Mexico slogan. How many of you have been to New Mexico? A few of you, right? So it is a very beautiful place. It's a high desert ecosystem and then mountains. So our school is in Albuquerque. It's at 5,000 feet. People often say, oh, isn't it so hot where you live in New Mexico? I say, growing up in hot, humid places, no, it is not hot in New Mexico. It is sometimes, but it's great weather. There are 10,000-foot peaks right on the edge of Albuquerque. And it's a very culturally rich place to live because there's this wonderful confluence of Hispanic culture and Native American culture. And that's very vibrant and visible and apparent and really informs a lot of the work that we do as educators in the state. The slogan that's not on the license plate is Land of Challenge. And that's not a slogan, but it's a good descriptor. So let me tell you a little bit about New Mexico so that you have that in terms of this work that we're trying to do around public-private partnerships. New Mexico has a population, the whole state, of slightly over 2 million people, so not a big population. It's one of the few states in the country where the population has just stabilized and perhaps is shrinking a little bit because people are leaving the state. The economy is not vibrant. We have had some real hits the last few years, like Intel shrinking, things like that. So it's a struggle there. If you read the Annie Casey Foundation report when it comes out every year, sadly you'll see New Mexico always vying for 48th, 49th, 50th in terms of childhood well-being. Childhood well-being is assessed based on food security, household income, access to preschool education, graduation rates, things like that. So we're down at the bottom, and I highlight that because it gives you a sense of the need in our state for wonderful teachers, for passionate school leaders, and for people who are committed to really supporting young people. Hello and welcome. And so that's a bit of the context. Here's our beautiful little school. And we were founded in 1994, and our doors opened in 1995. So in preparation for coming here, I loved reading about Hathaway Brown, and I thought, wow, 140 years, that is different. So a little bit of envy there, but there are some nice things about being a young school. My own story with the school is I came on board in 1998. I moved to Albuquerque from Washington, D.C. to become the first middle school head. I was middle school head for 15 years. And loved that work. And if you ever get the chance to work at a young school that's coming into its own, I would say yes. It's really a fun opportunity to get to grow and learn with the school and to get to be part of that creation. So we're a 6th through 12th grade school. We have about 510 to 20 students depending on the year, so pretty small, nice, manageable size on about a 50-acre campus adjacent to the river. So Bosque, B-O-S-Q-U-E, and I guess I didn't actually put the name of the school there. That in Spanish, of course, means forest. In our part of the world, it refers specifically to the ecosystem along the Rio Grande. So it's the cottonwood forest along the Rio Grande, and we're adjacent to that cottonwood forest and to the river. So thus the name. So that's a little bit about the school. I realized in my own evolution professionally and personally that I had done 20 years with middle school students, which I loved. The way you were talking about your preschoolers, I felt that way about middle school students. I still do. But I was ready to do something else, as you might imagine if you work with middle school students. And I realized that my own passion really was getting focused on working with educators and working with my colleagues. And I loved the work that we were doing as a middle school faculty, and I wanted to do that across the school, and I wanted to have some public component to this work. So I proposed this to, at the time, our interim head of school, our new head of school who was coming in, took it to the board, and thankfully they just said, sure, try it, you know, go for it, in this kind of lovely entrepreneurial way that a young school has without maybe thinking through some things that we probably should have thought through. We did have a model for another public-private partnership that started when the school started, which is an environmental education center. So they had that model to refer to and understood that. And so thus was born the Sophia Center about 3 years ago. We launched our first public program in January of my last year as middle school head, so there was a lot of overlap. I'll tell you a story about that actually. The December before I was launching this series, Reflect, Innovate, Act, which we're going to talk about, I went to our head of school, his name's Billy, and I said, Billy, the reality was I was really nervous, and I said, what would you think about my starting this series next fall? So it's January, it's kind of dark by 5 o'clock, these events take place after school. I really think it would be better to launch it next year when I'm done being middle school head. And he just listened, you know, he just listened to me talk this out, and he finally said no. And he said, politically not a good move, you need to jump in and start. And he said, how many people need to be there for you to feel like it's a success? And for some reason, out of my mouth, I blurted the number 8, which, you know, sort of ridiculous. I said 8, and he looked at me like, she's really lost her mind. And I said, okay, 8, and we'll call it a success. So we launched this series, and I'll share the numbers with you in just a minute. And just to give you the structure of it, it's once a month, from 4 to 6:30 on a Thursday, which is kind of a nice time. People are sort of getting to the end of the week. We have a different topic or theme every month, and anybody can come. Any educator can come. It's free. We feed people really well. It's usually been a long day for folks, and food is important, and good coffee is important. And I am always the host of those events, and sometimes the person leading. But I also invite other people in to lead, which is one of the collaborative models, which I will talk a little bit more about. So that's the basic structure. So we're 3 years and a couple of months into that series. We had our 26th event in this series last week. And we've had educators from, I think we're now at like 130 schools and organizations participate in the first 3 years. So it speaks to, I think, the hunger on the part of educators. I don't know enough about the landscape of public education here in Ohio to be able to you can tell me, but in New Mexico, the public school educators are pretty exhausted and discouraged, and there's a lot of pressure around testing. Class sizes have grown, and so there's really a big need on the part of educators for some sort of meaningful professional development. So the types of folks who are coming, we have participants from public, charter, and private schools. We have teachers, principals. We have folks from the education nonprofits or government entities like the parks and recreation. Those folks who are planning summer experiences for kids, they sometimes come. And pre-K through university. So it's a really interesting, we'll have a room of say 50 people each month, and you'll have a Head Start teacher next to the assistant head of school from one of the private schools, next to someone working in a young charter school with a struggling population of students. And there's really this richness of diverse experiences and settings that people are coming from that really inform the conversation. Before I talk about the types of topics that we're exploring that are large enough to invite that kind of collaboration, right? Are there questions just about the structure itself and when we meet and how that works? Yes?
The marketing piece of it, for where we are, our public school would not allow us to invite public school teachers through that school system to come. Did you face that challenge at all, that the public school was like, I'm not putting this out for my teachers to?
It might be happening, and I don't know it, but there are plenty of public school educators who do come and plenty of principals who send out our information regularly to their teachers. these happen after school. So it's not like it's infringing on their on their work day and it's free. So it's a great question though when I get to challenges. I think it's those unknowns, like who doesn't show up? You don't really know how to get at that. So I'll talk a little bit about that when I get there. It's a great question. But there's been a fair amount of openness to it. Okay, so there's the general structure. Should we jump on? So these are the kinds of topics, and we've had 26 events, so there's a big range, and on the sheet that I left out for everyone, you can see the kinds of topics that, on the front there, that we've covered. And the reason for these big picture topics is, one, that part of the mission of the Sophia Center is to really remind ourselves of the purposes of education, and to push back against the things that make education a reductive experience. And so we've really wanted to create a space where we can invite educators to remind themselves why they went into this profession, why we're passionate about this work, and how to reclaim that for ourselves. And what does that look like? So at every event, we go from really kind of big picture, philosophical, fairly academic or intellectual, and trying to have it be a challenging experience for people, to time to talk with other people at the event in some sort of structured format. And then we always move to what's the action plan. So we might be talking about something like the labyrinth of teaching and learning, which might sound really esoteric, but we set it up in a way where by the end of that, everyone is leaving with something that they can take back to their 5th grade math classroom tomorrow, or to their faculty meeting that they're getting ready to run, or to their art classroom, or whatever it happens to be. We're really interested in that action piece. So we all know what it's like to go and get inspired and have good ideas, and then you go back to your same old the next day, and it's hard to manifest that. So we've been committed to trying to build that in, and I think we probably do it better sometimes than others. So what I'd like to do from here is highlight within this monthly series, what are the different models that have been working and how those nurture that collaborative piece and that community partnership piece, okay? So I'm going to start with this first model, which is really institutional collaboration, and our taking our monthly event off campus and having it in a public site, okay? So, and in this particular model I'm going to share, it also is highlighting an event where I'm generating the content, which is not always the case, nor should it be. I mean, that would not be sustainable for me, and that's not the vision either. It's designed to be an exchange. This is an event that we had last week, and the focus or the theme of this monthly gathering was educators as artists. And the invitation to everyone there, and there were about 65 participants, was to look at what are the mindsets, the habits of mind, the ways of thinking about their work that artists have. And how, if we think of ourselves as artists and our education practice as an art form, how might we use those principles to inform our work? What would that mean? What sorts of possibilities would open up in that? What sorts of freedoms might open up in that? And so it was a 2.5-hour workshop around that, where people were really invited into that question. So again, kind of a big philosophical thing, but people left with, I'm going to do this differently in my classroom. I'm going to structure this event I have next week differently than I had planned. This was a collaboration with the National Hispanic Cultural Center and a group called Women in Creativity, so I'll talk about both of those things. The National Hispanic Cultural Center is a whole complex in Albuquerque that has an amazing museum and art collection, a couple of big theaters, they have tons of dance and music performances, they have a library, they have 2 restaurants, they have an education center. It's a hub of a lot of cultural activity in New Mexico and even in the region. So their mission aligns well with what we're trying to do of bringing people together from across the community to do meaningful work. So instead of our expecting everyone to come to the private school campus every month, we've a couple of times now have taken this event out into public space. And it's been interesting, when we've done that, the percentage of new people at that particular event is always like a tick up over when we're having it at our campus. So that's partly a messaging piece, right? It's saying this professional development program isn't about come over to Bosque School and see how we do it, right? We all know that that doesn't work. It's about us saying we want to create space in which educators can do this important work together. So it's been exciting to have the opportunity to work out in some of these public spaces. And I'll talk about this in a little bit in more depth, but what I found is that in general, people say yes to these sorts of collaborations. If you were saying, we have this monthly event, people come, they're excited about it, all we need is space, could we come and be in your space? And this evolved a little bit differently. So in addition to having the event in this public setting, the National Hispanic Cultural Center has a monthly event called Happy Arte Hour, and you can come and make art and buy a glass of wine or a beer or something, and it's a very vibrant community event. It's on the same night that we had this, so people could come to our event and then walk across the courtyard and go to Happy Arte Hour if they wanted to. And we planned it so that for this particular Happy Arte Hour, the woman teaching it is a classroom teacher in the public schools. So it was a really nice collaboration, both in terms of location and also in terms of programming. And I'll mention briefly, Women in Creativity is a month-long series of events in Albuquerque that they're not just for women, but they are led by women. And they're arts events and creative events and writing workshops. And so this was also part of their series for March. So that was that collaborative piece. And this is just, we went through a See, Think, Wonder activity around some pieces of writing by Elliot Eisner, and these were some of the wonderings, and I haven't typed them up yet, but I'm excited to do that. It was just last week. I wanted to share this photograph from the event because these are actually all my colleagues from my school. And they came to this event at the National Hispanic Cultural Center. And I want to share that because one of the things that's making this work, I think, is that we have faculty members from our school who participate or who sometimes lead. And so in addition to our creating something that's open to everyone else, our learning has been hugely enhanced by these relationships with educators across the community, and that's been really exciting. So it's an opportunity for all of us to be learning as well. And this is a not great quality video, but I'm going to show you just 45 seconds of it. I have a student intern, she's a senior at our school, she's fantastic, and I asked her at the last minute, Remy, can you just shoot some video on your phone while people are coming in the door? But I want to share the spirit of the work a little bit, and I think this will do that. I was so moved by this morning's talk with Reem, and when she was talking about branding being the essence of who you are, and then it's so important how you convey that, and I think that's a real needed growth area for the Sophia Center because there is a particular feel about these experiences that I don't know quite how to market or to tell. So she planted a lot of seeds in my mind this morning. So this is as people are arriving at the National Hispanic Cultural Center, and my friend Mooney is playing the violin as people are coming in just to have this sort of invitational feel. So I'll show you just a tiny bit of this. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. It's dangerous to run the slide deck without your glasses on. Everybody over 45 in here laughed, right? So let's see if I can try this again. Oops. Okay. So it's really wonky right at the beginning, but you see it all? there, welcome. Just to give you a feel of the event, and also it's so interesting, right, because I do a lot of work obviously with our faculty at the school, and we're in our second year of the classroom video project, and we started it by all of the school leaders, with videoing ourselves in various settings and then using the protocols to watch it. And then I watched this, and it's amazing what you see, right? I thought, why do we have one volunteer signing people in at the sign-in table, like things that you think are working fine, and then you see the evidence in the video. But there's just a nice vibrancy to the gatherings, and I wanted to share a glimpse of that. So just to recap that model, it's partnering with another institution in the city that draws a different group of people. It's partnering around a program that exists at that institution, and it's bringing in people like Mooney, who's a well-known musician in the community, to just create a nice experience for people as they're arriving. So the second model that I'll talk about is really a model that allows for other people to lead. So rather than my generating the content for these gatherings, I'm inviting other people to share their expertise, and that's been so enriching. I think I just hadn't realized how much that would change my own practice as an educator and my own lived experience as an educator, to get to learn from all these different people. So that's been a real blessing. So I'll talk about two models. This is a picture of where we usually have the events on our campus. It's a beautiful space with big high ceilings. You can't see it that well here. And this is Michelle Duval, who runs the Mindful Center in New Mexico, and is fairly well known for her teaching. She's an outstanding teacher of mindful practices. And she came and did an hour-long introductory session on what mindfulness is and what it isn't. And she led us through a practice. And so this was an opportunity to collaborate with her. But then what we did for the breakout sessions was through some thinking, we figured out some people in the community who are doing mindful practices in their classrooms. So one elementary school teacher, she came and led a breakout session and shared what she's doing with her kids and what's working, and the hilarious moments, right, when they say outrageous things when you're trying to do this mindful practice, and then the 6-year-old comes up with some great insight, right? And a woman who teaches at the college level led a breakout session. So these were ways to create a leadership opportunity for these educators doing really cool stuff in their settings, and also for us to get to learn from that. These aren't, the people who led the breakout sessions aren't necessarily people who could come and do a whole workshop on mindfulness, but they could share their practice, and that is really energizing for people to get to share what they're doing that's working, and then for the rest of us to get to learn from that. This is my colleague Tamisha, who works at our school, and I wanted to highlight that on occasion, I've also invited people from our faculty and staff to lead these monthly gatherings. I haven't done that a lot because I really want to avoid falling into the private school saying this is how it works at our school, which isn't always workable at other schools. But Tamisha has led a couple of sessions or breakout sessions, and in this particular instance was doing a workshop on cultural competency that was really well received, but she also collaborated with some public school educators for that event. So there's a nice opportunity for our own teachers to be involved in that way. Early on, I connected with a couple of charter schools in Albuquerque. There's a big charter school movement in New Mexico, so there are a lot of charter schools, but two of the most established ones doing really excellent work, really admirable work. I invited them to come and co-lead a Saturday retreat about professional development practices that work well. And they did that, and just that invitation alone has meant there's an ongoing relationship. When people are invited to share what they're doing, it's such a gesture of honor and support and validation. And so it's a great way to connect. And then the last model in this series that I'll share is colloquy. And I have to tell you that I didn't know what this word meant when I picked it. So, you know, we know colloquium, right? But I love this word. And I was looking for a great word to describe basically like, hey, come to this event and we're gonna read together and talk. And I thought, what would make it sound kind of catchy and fun? And so colloquy, I'm just gonna read it. A conversation or dialogue, a high-level serious discussion, a meeting featuring a group discussion, an exchange of views for the purpose of exploring a subject or deciding an issue. And I have a question for you all. How many of you feel like you have as much time as you want to keep up on your professional reading? Right? Yeah, so all those books like that I've read the first 20 pages of, right? And so I wanted part of this monthly series to be an opportunity to read. And I think reading's important, and I think to stay in touch with that kind of intellectual inquiry is really important. And so we've now had 5 of these, so 1 to 2 a year since we started. And the first one I just did, and certainly not with the intention that it would be a repeat. But for some people, it's their favorite format. And so I want to share, and I've spread out a lot of random materials, which you have your set of paperwork, but the other materials, if you feel like perusing them or passing them around, this is what colloquy can look like. So in this particular instance, the glasses are new, I haven't quite figured it out yet. In this particular instance, there's quite a range of topics. I've done a colloquy where there's a real focus. So we did a colloquy, it's all place-conscious education. So all the readings had to do with that. In this particular one, which I'll send around, there's really a variety. And because we're inviting so many different kinds of educators into the conversation, the needs are pretty big, right, and pretty varied. So I really try to have some things that are, some articles that are going to be accessible to the most exhausted person in the room after teaching 4th grade all day, right? Like, oh, this is what I can manage today. I'm here, I've got some good food, I'm excited to talk with colleagues, and then some more challenging pieces. So in this particular collection, which I'll send around, I would say on the challenge end is the Michael and Bartoli article that appeared in Independent School Magazine summer before last, What White Children Need to Know About Race. And I would say the more immediately accessible one was a short piece in Ed Leadership about how to teach students about the brain. And then for each one of those, I put together a series of guiding questions for reflection and discussion. And then the collaborative piece is I tap some colleagues who come regularly to the events and say, would you facilitate a breakout session? I'll send you the article, I'll send you the questions, would you just be willing to hold that space? And again, I mean, I'm just amazed that people